August 1945. Across the Pacific, from the coral runways of Okinawa to the carrier decks patrolling the coast of Japan, hundreds of F4U Corsairs sit in gleaming rows beneath the tropical sun. Their distinctive bent wings catch the light, the unmistakable silhouette of what Japanese pilots called whistling death. These are not relics of defeat, but instruments of victory, the fighters that helped sweep the Imperial Japanese Navy from the skies and supported Marines storming island after island toward Tokyo. Yet, with Japan's surrender, a question emerges that no one had planned for. What happens to more than 12,000 of the most capable carrier fighters ever built when the war they were designed to fight suddenly ends? The F4U Corsair represented one of American aviation's greatest achievements. From its first flight in May 1940 to the final aircraft rolling off the production line in December 1952, the Corsair established records that still stand. It was the first American fighter to exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight. Its 11-to-1 kill ratio against Japanese aircraft remains unmatched in the history of naval aviation. More than 2,140 enemy aircraft fell to Corsair pilots during the war, with only 189 Corsairs lost in return. Three manufacturers, Vought, Goodyear, and Brewster, produced 12,571 Corsairs across more than a decade, making it the longest production run of any American fighter from World War II. When the fighting stopped in August 1945, the Navy and Marine Corps possessed thousands of these powerful machines scattered across dozens of airfields throughout the Pacific and continental United States. Unlike the fate awaiting many wartime aircraft, the Corsair would not be consigned immediately to the scrapyard. Its story was only beginning. The immediate post-war period brought difficult decisions for American military planners. The rapid demobilization that followed victory meant shrinking budgets and reduced manpower. Aircraft that had cost the government tens of thousands of dollars each suddenly sat idle, their combat missions complete. Many types faced wholesale scrapping, their aluminum feeding the hungry furnaces of American industry. The Corsair, however, earned a reprieve that few other fighters would receive. Several factors preserved the bent-wing fighter from immediate destruction. Its rugged construction and exceptional performance meant it remained competitive with newer designs. Its ability to carry substantial bomb loads, up to 4,000 pounds of ordnance, made it invaluable for ground attack missions. Perhaps most importantly, the Navy recognized that jet technology, while promising, had not yet matured sufficiently to replace proven piston-engine fighters in all roles. The Corsair would serve as a bridge between the propeller age and the jet era. Through late 1945 and into 1946, the Navy consolidated its Corsair fleet. Older variants were retired, their useful components salvaged, and their airframes sold for scrap. Newer models, particularly the F4U-4 with its more powerful engine and four-bladed propeller, were retained for active service. These aircraft equipped both Navy and Marine squadrons as the military transitioned to peacetime operations. Training continued at air stations from Pensacola to San Diego, young pilots learning to master the Corsair's demanding flight characteristics. The Korean conflict, which erupted in June 1950, transformed the Corsair's post-war trajectory entirely. When North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel, the United States found itself suddenly at war again, and the Corsair proved its continued value immediately. On July 3, 1950, F4U-4B Corsairs from the carrier USS Valley Forge launched strikes against North Korean airfields and rail yards at Pyongyang. These were among the first American combat missions of the war, and the Corsair was leading the way. Over the following 3 years, Corsairs flew more than 80% of close air support missions for American forces in Korea. 26 Navy squadrons, most carrier-based, and 6 Marine Corps squadrons committed their bent-wing fighters to the conflict. The aircraft proved ideally suited to the Korean War's particular demands. Unlike the strategic bombing campaigns of World War II, Korea emphasized close coordination with ground troops, precision strikes on supply lines, and interdiction of enemy logistics. The Corsair excelled at all of these. Marine pilots valued the aircraft's ability to loiter over battlefields far longer than the new jet fighters. Its powerful engine allowed it to carry heavier ordnance loads than the jets, while maintaining the slow-speed handling necessary for accurate bombing runs in mountainous terrain. During the desperate fighting around the Chosin Reservoir in late 1950, Corsairs flew continuous daylight missions supporting the 1st Marine Division's breakout from Chinese encirclement. VMF-312 alone accumulated nearly 2,000 flight hours during the withdrawal, losing 4 aircraft and 1 pilot while providing the air cover that helped save thousands of lives. The Corsair even achieved what seemed impossible in the jet age. On September 10, 1952, Marine Captain Jesse Fulmer found himself engaged by a Soviet-built MiG-15 jet fighter. In a turning contest that should have favored the faster jet, Fulmer maneuvered his Corsair into firing position and sent the MiG down with his cannon fire. It remains the only confirmed instance of a propeller-driven fighter downing a MiG-15 in aerial combat. Though Fulmer was subsequently shot down by the MiG's wingman, he survived to tell the tale. Night operations over Korea demonstrated another aspect of Corsair versatility. Lieutenant Guy Bourdillon, flying the F4U-5N night fighter variant with its wing-mounted radar, became the Navy's only ace of the Korean War. His 5 victories came against low-flying North Korean intruders that proved difficult for jet interceptors to catch. The Corsair's ability to operate at slower speeds made it ideally suited for hunting these harassment raiders that plagued American positions after dark. The Korean War extracted a heavy toll. 328 Corsairs were lost to enemy action during the conflict, 312 F4Us, and 16 AU-1s. Almost all fell to ground fire rather than aerial combat, testament to the dangerous low-altitude missions the aircraft routinely flew. Yet the Corsair's contribution to the war effort was undeniable. It had proven that a World War II design could remain effective a full decade after its introduction. While American Corsairs fought in Korea, the aircraft was beginning a remarkable second career with foreign air forces. The French Navy, rebuilding after years of occupation and seeking capable carrier aircraft for its colonial conflicts, became the largest foreign operator of the type. In 1952, Vaught's Dallas factory produced the final Corsair variant, the F4U-7, built specifically for the French Aéronavale. 94 of these aircraft were manufactured, combining the ground attack capabilities of the AU-1 with the more powerful engine of the F4U-4. The last Corsair rolled off the production line on Christmas Eve 1952, ending more than a decade of continuous production. The French received their new fighters through the American Military Assistance Program and immediately put them to work. In the spring of 1954, Flotille 14F arrived at Da Nang in Vietnam without their aircraft. The following day, the carrier USS Saipan delivered 25 war-weary AU-1 Corsairs, veterans of Korean War combat, directly from Marine Air Group 12 in Japan. These aircraft flew in support of the desperate French defense at Dien Bien Phu. During 3 months of operations over Vietnam, French Corsairs flew 959 combat sorties, totaling more than 1,300 flight hours. They struck Viet Minh positions surrounding the besieged garrison, delivering bombs and rockets against enemy trenches and artillery positions. 6 aircraft and 2 pilots were lost before Dien Bien Phu fell on May 7, 1954. It was effectively the end of French Indochina, but not the end of French Corsair operations. Following the ceasefire, the AU-1s returned to American custody, but French F4U-7s continued serving throughout the 1950s. They flew combat missions during the Algerian War of Independence, operating from bases at Oran, Tellergma, and Bizerte. In 1956, French Corsairs participated in the Suez Crisis, striking Egyptian targets alongside British and Israeli forces. The last French Corsairs flew with Flottille 14F at Quers until September 1964, marking the end of European Corsair operations. Across the Atlantic, the bent-wing fighter found new homes in Latin America. Honduras acquired Corsairs through American military aid programs, eventually operating 17 aircraft, including 9 F4U-5s and 8 F4U-4s. El Salvador obtained 13 Goodyear-built FG-1D Corsairs for its small air force. These aircraft would participate in one of aviation history's most unusual conflicts. In July 1969, long-simmering tensions between Honduras and El Salvador erupted into open warfare. The conflict, triggered partly by disputed World Cup qualifying matches but rooted in deeper issues of land reform and immigration, became known as the Football War. For aviation historians, it holds a unique distinction. The skies over Central America would witness the last combat between piston-engine fighters in history. Both nations deployed their aging Corsairs alongside other World War II veterans, including P-51 Mustangs. The fighting began on July 14th when Salvadoran aircraft struck Honduran airfields. Honduras responded with Corsair strikes against Salvadoran fuel storage facilities at Acajutla, destroying 20% of the country's petroleum reserves. On the morning of July 17th, Honduran Captain Fernando Soto was leading a ground support mission when he encountered 2 Salvadoran Mustangs attacking his wingman. In the ensuing dogfight, Soto shot down one of the Mustangs, killing the pilot. Later that same day, on his 4th sortie, Captain Soto engaged 2 Salvadoran Corsairs. What followed was the final aerial combat between these legendary fighters. In a twisting engagement over the Honduran countryside, Soto downed both enemy aircraft. One exploded in midair, killing its pilot. Captain Soto had achieved 3 aerial victories in a single day, all flying the same F4U-5 Corsair, registration FAH-609. He remains the only pilot from any Central American Air Force ever credited with confirmed aerial victories. The irony was not lost on aviation historians. The Corsairs' final combat kills were against other Corsairs, a fitting if melancholy conclusion to an era. The Football War ended after just 100 hours when the Organization of American States negotiated a ceasefire. Honduras continued operating its Corsairs until 1979, making them among the last military Corsairs in active service anywhere in the world. El Salvador's survivors were retired earlier, their airframes eventually finding their way to collectors and museums. Captain Soto's victorious Corsair, FAH-609, survived its combat career and today sits on display at the Museo del Aire in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Visitors can examine the actual aircraft that wrote the final chapter of propeller fighter combat. Its blue paint faded, but its historical significance eternal. Back in the United States, the Corsair's military service concluded more quietly. The last active-duty Marine Corps squadrons retired their bent-wing fighters in 1955 as jet aircraft assumed all combat roles. The Navy had already transitioned to jets for carrier operations, though specialized variants, like the F4U-5N night fighter, lingered somewhat longer. By the late 1950s, American Corsairs had largely vanished from military service. The question of what happened to 12,000 aircraft produced over a decade admits no single answer. Combat losses during World War II and Korea accounted for hundreds. Training accidents and operational attrition consumed many more. The majority, however, met the fate common to surplus military aircraft. They were scrapped. Across American naval air stations in the late 1940s and through the 1950s, Corsairs arrived for disposal processing. Maintenance crews stripped them of useful components, radios, instruments, and engines that might serve other aircraft or find civilian applications. What remained was cut apart and fed into smelters, the aluminum recycled into everything from cooking pots to automobile parts. The steel shortage of the immediate post-war years made scrap metal valuable, and thousands of Corsairs disappeared into the industrial furnaces of peacetime America. Some aircraft escaped destruction through foreign military sales. Beyond France, Honduras, and El Salvador, Corsairs served with Argentina, which operated them into the 1960s. The Royal Navy had flown more than 2,000 Corsairs during World War II, though these were returned or scrapped after 1945. New Zealand similarly retired its wartime Corsairs, with most eventually meeting the scrappers' torch. The preservation of Corsairs as museum pieces and flying warbirds came almost accidentally at first. Military vehicle collectors showed little interest in surplus aircraft during the 1940s and 50s. Aircraft that survived often did so through continued use rather than deliberate preservation. Some found employment as crop dusters or racing aircraft, their powerful engines useful for civilian applications. By the 1970s, attitudes had shifted. A growing community of warbird enthusiasts began seeking surviving examples for restoration. Several Corsairs that had appeared in the NBC television series Ba Ba Black Sheep, depicting the exploits of VMF-214, sparked renewed public interest in the type. 8 Corsairs flew in that production, and most survive today, their television fame having ensured their preservation. Modern surveys identify approximately 120 substantially complete Corsair airframes worldwide. Of these, roughly 38 remain airworthy, regularly appearing at air shows across North America, Europe, and Australasia. Another 60 are preserved on static display in museums and collections. Perhaps 22 more are currently under restoration or in storage awaiting attention. The distribution reflects the aircraft's American origins. Approximately 85 Corsairs, more than 70% of all survivors, are located in the United States. Museums from the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum to the National Naval Aviation Museum at Pensacola display carefully restored examples. Private collectors maintain flying Corsairs that thrill airshow crowds with the distinctive whistle of air rushing through their oil cooler vents, the same sound that earned them their fearsome Japanese nickname. Smaller numbers survive elsewhere. New Zealand preserves 2 examples from its wartime fleet. Australia holds another. Honduras maintains Captain Soto's historic fighter. Several French F4U-7s returned to the United States after aero-naval service and now fly with American collectors, their combat histories in Algeria and Suez adding to their mystique. The surviving Corsairs represent less than 1% of total production. precious fragments of an aircraft that once filled Pacific skies and carrier decks by the thousand. Each airworthy example requires constant attention. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, already demanding during wartime service, proves even more challenging to maintain decades after spare parts production ceased. Skilled mechanics fabricate replacement components or scavenge them from derelict airframes, ensuring these legendary fighters continue to fly. The story of what happened to America's F4U Corsairs after World War II spans 4 decades of active service and 3 continents of combat operations. From the carrier decks of the Pacific in 1945 to the Korean mountains in 1953, from the jungles of Vietnam in 1954 to the skies over Central America in 1969, the bent-wing fighter proved its worth again and again. It outlived the conflict it was designed for, outlived the propeller age itself, and wrote the final chapter of an era when fighters still depended on internal combustion rather than jet thrust. Today, the few survivors scattered across museums and private collections serve as tangible links to that vanished world. When a restored Corsair thunders overhead at an air show, its massive propeller churning the air and that distinctive whistle rising from its cowling, spectators glimpse something of what Japanese soldiers and Korean communist troops once experienced. They hear a sound that meant death was diving from the sky. The machines that once symbolized American air power now stand for memory and preservation. They remind us how quickly even the most numerous and capable weapons can vanish, and how thoroughly the passage of time erases the physical evidence of even recent history. Of 12,571 Corsairs built, barely 100 survive in any form. The rest have returned to the aluminum from which they came, leaving behind only photographs, records, and the fading memories of the men who flew them. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, watch what happened to Germany's Luftwaffe planes after World War II next. It explores how thousands of advanced German aircraft were captured, studied, and destroyed in the aftermath of the war. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more History Inside.